All right, guys, we're live. It's Justin Stenstrom from Elite Man Magazine, and my guest today is Terry Virts, the astronaut and the author of the book, How to Astronaut, just came out September 15th. Terry, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Hey, it's good to be here with you.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we tried to do this call before. I've always been fascinated in space and NASA and, just the whole experience and idea of traveling to space and the moon and all that stuff. And I never had an astronaut on the show before, but I've always kind of wanted to interview somebody. So when you came across, my email, I was just like blown away. Like, this is awesome. I have to have this guy on, pick his brain about what it's really like to be in space and all the crazy elements and stuff of what goes behind it. Just kind of first starting off, I know you have a background in being in the military, Air Force, and I had a guy on the show before who was a fighter jet pilot. Is there like a similarity, a crossover between flying fighter jets and then also like being in a rocket ship taking off?
Yeah. So I'll say, first of all, the most important training you can do on Earth for space flight is flying jets. And it's not the stick and rudder skills. It's not how you turn or land or even the G-forces. It's about something we call situational awareness in the military. So keeping your brain ahead of the jet, thinking faster than the airplane's going. And if you're flying a Cessna at 100 knots, you need situational awareness. But when you're flying a T-38 or an F-16 at 300 or 500 or 600 knots, your brain just has to think faster than this machine is going. And so that process of keeping situational awareness is by far the best training for being an astronaut. But the G-forces themselves are also important. F-16 was a 9G jet, so imagine getting squashed down into your seat at 9 times your body weight. It's brutal. I mean, it really just crushes you, and you have to be in really good shape just to stay awake, because otherwise the blood will come out of your brain and you'll pass out and die. Which I shouldn't laugh. A lot of guys have done just that. But a rocket is only maybe 3 or 4 Gs, so it's not as many G forces. But a launch takes 8.5 minutes, so you're under a lot of pretty reasonable amount of Gs for a long time. If you're flying in a fighter jet in a turn or in like a high performance sports car, you can get a lot of Gs, but only for a few seconds. It doesn't go on for 8.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. How fast is like speed wise comparable for the rocket ship takeoff to like hitting a 9G like turn or whatever in the speed in the jet?
So in order to get into orbit, you got to go over 17,000 miles an hour. So it's, 5 miles a second.
Wow.
And that's why you have to accelerate for so long. When you step on the gas in your Mustang GT or whatever, you might get pushed back in your seat at 1 G or maybe 2 Gs for a couple seconds, and then you're going 100 miles an hour. But if you want to go 17,000 miles an hour, you have to do that for 8.5 minutes.
Wow.
So that's the reason why it's so long, is because it just takes a long time to accelerate that fast.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that. It makes sense though, but I figured that like you'd have like an initial burst and then it kind of just like kept that speed up, but it's like a gradual increase in speed, right?
It is. It's constantly accelerating. If you went to 17,000 right away, you'd still be down in the atmosphere and you would melt immediately. Like,
really?
Nothing. Yeah. The space shuttle had all that black tile on the bottom of it. It was a special heat shield. The Apollo capsules and the Boeing and SpaceX capsules, they all have a special heat shield on the bottom, because when you hit air going that fast, it creates friction and it just melts metal. That's actually what killed the Space Shuttle Columbia crew. They had a hole poked in their heat shield, and that hot plasma got inside the wing and melted it off. Wow. So you have to kind of slowly accelerate and get out of the atmosphere, and then you really accelerate to the high speeds.
Could those people in the Columbia shuttle, could they have survived if they'd done it differently, or was it just like it was flawed from the beginning and no matter what they did, it was going to backfire?
Well, the problem that happened on Columbia during launch, a piece of foam. So there's this foam insulation on the fuel tank. It popped off and it hit the wing of the shuttle going 500 knots. And just like a hurricane, we had a hurricane in Louisiana. If something light gets in that wind, it's flying at 100 miles an hour too. Yeah. So a piece of foam 500 miles an hour into the wing poked a hole in it. And once the hole was there, there was some talk about the crew being able to, they could have stuffed like a wet towel or stuffed something in the hole to try and delay the plasma, but it's a couple thousand-degree plasma. There was talk they could have done a rescue mission. Unfortunately, NASA management completely ignored it and said it's not a problem, we're fine. And it was really a management mistake that killed the crew more than it was a technical mistake.
Yeah. How long did they know about it before it actually killed them? Was there like a long
Two
period?
weeks. 2
2 weeks?
weeks. I was what we call family escort. So my job on that flight was to be at launch and landing with the families,
Hmm.
the wives and the kids, and they designated an astronaut to help them during the mission. And so because of that, I was getting these emails. In fact, there's a chapter in my new book about this. And so one of the emails came across with a little MPEG, little video clip, and you can see, frame by frame, this thing comes off and it hits the wing and explodes. And I said, holy shit, that doesn't look good. So I talked to some of the more senior astronauts and they said, oh yeah, it's fine. It's not a problem. Well, 2 weeks later, they went in orbit. They were fine for a couple weeks. And then 2 weeks later, when they came back to Earth is when they had the problem.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it was bad. It was not
Yeah.
good.
How many years ago was that? Like 20 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it was 2003, so almost 20 years.
Yeah, I kind of like vaguely remember it. Not much details about it, but I do remember it.
Yeah.
So, what makes you want to get into this whole business of being an astronaut? I know like a lot of kids dream about it, but it wasn't actually my dream as a kid to ever be an astronaut. But I know a lot of friends and stuff that like wanted to be, because I guess I wasn't that much of a daredevil. But it's such a unique thing, man. Like, did you always have this in you to want to be an astronaut?
Yeah, I did. I've written about this. When I was a kid, the first book I wrote or I read was about Apollo. So I grew up with pictures of rockets and galaxies, and my wall was covered with that stuff. So I was really lucky, man. This is what I wanted to do from a young age, and I got to do it.
Yeah. After the military flying those F-16s, do they approach you or you approach them about it?
Oh, I approached them. It was a test pilot school. Actually, I was still a student, and this announcement came out. Hey, NASA's going to have a new astronaut class. So I said, that sounds pretty cool, and went through the application process. Back then you actually had to fill out paper. You'd print out on the printer. I had a big thick stack of application, and now it's all online. But it's a pretty grueling process. It took months to go through.
What types of training, like what's the training look like for that? Is it similar to say like, is it similar to the fighter jet training where it's like a lot of tough stuff, or is it like a Navy SEALs training where it's like very elite and like physically and mentally challenging, stuff like that?
It's not as physical as the SEALs, but there's still physical training that you have to do, because going into space, you have to be in shape. You don't have to be in shape, but if you want your body to be healthy, you need to exercise. The less you exercise, the more problems you have when you get back to Earth.
Yeah.
So the biggest probably issue is the mental aspect, because there's so many different things you got to do. You got to, you are, especially on the space station, on the space shuttle, everybody had their own job. Like there was a lot of division of labor. I was the pilot, someone else was a spacewalker, someone else did the whatever. But on the station, everybody does everything. So you got to fly the robotic arm, and you got to learn spacewalking, and I was a pilot, and you do science, and you do interviews, and so there's a little bit of everything that everybody has to learn, which I love. Like we were talking about being ADD before we started, and that's me. I like to do different stuff, but the training was a lot of fun and a lot of different stuff.
So when you're in that training, is it like that James Bond movie where he's like spinning around in that thing and like they're messing with like his head? What's it called?
Centrifuge.
Yeah. Is there a lot of that kind of stuff going on to get you used to like the elements of takeoff and being up there?
Yeah. So NASA has a centrifuge. So before your first flight, they make you go do it. Your second and third flight, you don't do it again. And then, well, actually, NASA doesn't have it. The Air Force has it. So we would drive over to San Antonio, to the old Brooks Air Force Base, and do the centrifuge, which I had done. One of my projects as a test pilot was a new G suit to help pilots withstand really strong G forces for a long time. And then I went back to do the same centrifuge at NASA. That was pretty cool. But the Russians also have a centrifuge, and that's actually a lot more important because their capsule can do a lot of G-forces, and they put you in this thing, and it's a big arm. It's not 100 feet, but it's probably 30 feet or 50 feet. You know, it's a pretty big thing, and they spin you around. And there was that scene with Roger Moore where they were doing this and smashing him down. But yeah, we do the same thing. They smash you to the thing, and you have to talk and do your procedures and make sure you can stay awake while you're getting smashed.
When you say getting smashed, what are they doing? Smashing you up against something else, or just like spinning you around? It kind of feels like you're
So
smashing back and
yeah,
forth.
you know, if you had a bucket of paint and you put it on its side, the paint would all run out, right?
Yeah.
But if you held it out here and you spun it around like that,
Yeah.
imagine just standing there spinning the paint around.
Mm-hmm.
It's on its side, but the paint's not falling out because it's all smashed against the back.
Yep.
That's what a centrifuge does. It spins and it smashes things, you know, away from the center of the spinning.
Gotcha.
So the centrifuge lets you feel those G-forces.
And in that whole time, you're able to still process, recall things, use your analytical mind, and
Yeah,
like
that's the point. Yeah.
how do you train for that? Is that just something that you naturally figure out on your own, or is it something you can like work your way up to, like building up those forces over time?
As a fighter pilot, that's what I did. Because whenever you turn an airplane, if the airplane's going fast and you want to do a hard turn, you get smashed down in your seat. It's just like spinning the paint bucket.
Yeah.
So that was something that I was used to. The Russian, for their cosmonauts, they actually make those guys go parachuting, which I think is great. I think that's a great idea. And while they're parachuting, they'll be holding a book, and they're falling and they're having to do math problems and stuff. Wow. It's a way to make you think while you might die. And so
yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool training though. That's pretty badass, but also intense. And so how long was the training? Like a year or two, a couple of years of that?
The NASA, they call it ASCAN training because they want to make you feel good about yourself, astronaut candidate. So the ASCAN training is about a year and a half. When I went through, it was mostly about the shuttle. And then we had some space station stuff. The shuttle was super, super, super complicated. I got my room here, I've got a giant bookshelf with all my shuttle books. Wow. And then also space station. So we had to learn the shuttle and the station. And then after we were done with that, you had to learn rendezvous and you had to learn EVA or spacewalking. And so there's a lot to learn, all the different science. And really the answer, people say, how long did you train? The real answer is my whole life. Like it's not just a year of training. To learn how to use this box and plug this thing in, it's an hour of training. But to be a well-rounded astronaut who can do a lot of things in a lot of different fields, it's a lifetime of learning, which is pretty cool. That's what I like. I like learning new stuff.
Nice. So can you break this down for us when you're from the time of takeoff in the what do you call it? The rocket to take off.
Yeah.
How long is that process? And then like to get to the space station, how much longer is that? And then like how long are you staying at the space station? And do you travel like to the moon or whatever from the space station? Like, can you break that whole thing down for us?
Yeah. So it all starts off in crew quarters a few hours before launch. You go through this process. In Russia, they actually take an alcohol swab and they clean your whole body down to disinfect it. Like there's not going to be any COVID in space because they literally wipe your whole body down with alcohol. Like they want to kill all the bugs they can.
Yeah.
So you're not taking those into space. You get dressed. You go through this process. They got these Russian Orthodox priests that bless you. They throw holy water on you as you're walking out the door. So there's a whole process. You drive the bus out. It's 30 or 45-minute drive to the rocket. You get strapped in. You sit there for a couple hours while everybody else drives as far away as they can, and then you launch. The rocket engines burn for about 8.5 minutes, and then you're in space. And then they shut down, and then you're floating. And then there's really two different profiles that the Russian Soyuz does. The space shuttle took about 48 hours to rendezvous. The SpaceX that just launched, I think, was about 20 hours, a little less than a day. The Soyuz can either do 4 orbits, which is 6 hours, or 32 orbits, which is 2 days. So they normally try and rendezvous in about 6 hours. That's what I did. I had a 6-hour rendezvous. So you get into space and you're busy. You're still like having to fly the spaceship. and then 6 hours later, you're docked and attached to the space station. So that happened pretty fast. So it's either 8.5-minute flight, either 6 hours or 1 day or 2 days to rendezvous. It depends on the rocket that you're on, depends on the capsule you're in.
Nice.
Then I was there for on my flight, I was there for 200 days. It was supposed to be 169 days. We went through, back in 2015, we had 3 different cargo ships blow up, or American orbital, Russian Progress, and a SpaceX, back to back in 8 months. 3 of them blew up.
Wow.
When the Russian one blew up, they delayed our replacement crew because they fly on the same rocket. And when they delayed our replacement crew, they said, "Hey, you guys we're not gonna bring you back yet." So I got stuck in space. I didn't know for how long. It ended up being an extra month.
Wow. Did that suck being there, like stranded an extra month?
It's funny, actually, when COVID started, I wrote a quick short book about that very subject. So because there were so many similarities, we were stuck. We didn't know when we were getting back. And so it was like 10 things, how to get through being quarantined, 10 tips. For me and my crew, Samantha and Anton, also the 3 people that were there, we took it as, A, we can't control it. And B, we're in space. We'll have the rest of our lives back on Earth. So I made the most of it. I was making an IMAX film called A Beautiful Planet. So I shot some extra scenes for that movie. I took a lot of pictures. I took like the most pictures ever of an astronaut while I was in space. So I used the time to take pictures. We did some big maintenance reconfiguration of the station. So I just tried to make the most of the time. And I figured, I'll get back to Earth and enjoy my time on Earth when I get home.
How, and this, I know I'm like totally ignorant with this stuff. I'm like all over the place, but how high up is the space station and what is it actually like at the space station?
Yeah. So it's about 400 kilometers above Earth, 250 miles, which, you could be at 100 miles or you could be at 1,000 or 100,000 miles. It's all space. Okay. The key is that you're above the atmosphere, and we have a magnetic field around Earth that causes the aurora, but it also is like a big offensive line. It blocks cosmic radiation from coming in. Mm-hmm. And the reason why you and I are alive is because we have a magnetic field. Mars doesn't, so there could never be life on Mars for a long time. I mean, you can go there in a spacesuit, but you can't have what's in your backyard, which, by the way, is gorgeous. You can't have that on Mars because there's no magnetic field, and everything would die from radiation. So,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and the station's pretty big. It's about the size of a 747, or maybe bigger than that. There's a lot, about 15 modules or so, and it's a pretty big place, really.
So when you're up there at the space station, how big is it? Is it like a giant, say, mall or something like that, or is it like a lot small?
Well, it's a tube. So, like I said, it's more like a 747. But it's the outside is bigger than they're bigger than a football field. It's huge. Yeah. It's more than 300 feet across. So it's not, the inside is not that big, but the outside really is. But inside, some guys have said it's 2 747s, but it seems too big. I think it's more like one big airliner, but there's room to get away. You can go be by yourself, and there's only 6 or 7 people there usually. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That's cool. So is it just the U.S. that does it? Because I know you mentioned a few times already that like a lot about the Russians' experience. Have you worked with them a lot, or is it just like separate? You guys are doing different things, but you're just aware of what they're doing?
When I was commander, I tried to make it so that we were one crew. So I wanted to have dinner with my Russian crewmates as often as I could. I tried to speak Russian. I tried to make jokes in Russian. So, having just being one crew was really important to me.
Nice. So when you go up, do you guys fly up together there, or do you take like 2 separate rockets and then you meet up while you're in there?
No, we flew together.
Figured, yeah.
Well, on my first flight, I was on the shuttle, so that was only Americans. But on my second flight, I was on a Russian Soyuz with a Russian and an Italian. So and now that we have SpaceX and next year Boeing's going to be flying, we're still going to have some Americans flying on Soyuz, and they'll have some Russians flying on our vehicles. because you don't ever want a situation where there's no Russians on the station, or you don't want a situation where there's no Americans on the station, because we're really the experts on our half.
Mm-hmm.
They have their side of the station, we have our side, and I'm trained, and I can get along on a Russian segment. It's just a lot better to have a Russian down there because they know the side better. So we have our own spaceships, but we're still going to be flying with each other, which is great. That's an important part of the space station, is partnership.
Yeah. Cool. So when you're actually on the rocket and flying up, and like you mentioned, obviously you're a pilot, like that's your training. Do you pilot the actual rocket ship, or is it just computerized and you're kind of just like sitting in there and it's doing
Yeah.
itself?
The space shuttle was manual. I mean, the launch was actually done automatically, but it could have been done manually, and everything else, I flew the space shuttle in space. I did a rendezvous with the space shuttle in space. So that was awesome. As a pilot, it was like the best flying machine ever.
Really?
The Soyuz is pretty much automated. The commander can take over and do things manually, but it's automated. And Boeing and SpaceX are 100% automated. You can take over and you can fly it manually, but they're designed, the typical flight is you just sit there and a day later you feel a clunk and you're attached to the station. Everything's automated.
That's pretty cool. What are your thoughts on the whole SpaceX and all that stuff, like what Elon Musk is doing?
I mean, I think it's great. When I was at the space station, two SpaceX Dragons came up full of cargo, full of food and clothes and equipment. The third one blew up, but the first two worked, so that was good. And their philosophy is, if there's a problem, they just fix it and they launch again the next day. They're not NASA. If there's a problem with NASA, we'll wait a few years to have meetings before we move on to the next thing. So the example I give, there's two different big projects. One is this big NASA rocket. It's called SLS. Really cool name. And it was born back in 2005 when George W. Bush came up with the follow-on program after the Columbia accident. It was called Constellation. So this big rocket was born. In the same year, Mike Griffin, our NASA administrator, gave a contract to SpaceX so that they could bring cargo to the space station commercially. And everybody said, oh, this is crazy. It's never going to work. So in 2011, maybe 2012, they brought their first SpaceX cargo ship to the station. And when I was there in 2014 and 2015, they brought two up, and they've done 20 or 30 of them, right? So 2005 to 2012, they get a contract and there's ships docking with the space station. SLS, on the other hand, was born at the same time. It hasn't flown yet. It's going to fly unmanned, the first stage only, maybe next year, maybe in 2 or 3 years. And it won't fly with people for 2 or 3 or 4, who knows when it's going to be. Again, that's only the first stage. They don't even have the second stage. So when you compare the two programs, SpaceX is orders of magnitude faster than what the government program is doing. So although, they have growing pains and, sometimes there's safety issues, they're just so innovative and so fast, and they're kind of doing things the way they should be done. Whereas the government programs often degenerate into kind of jobs programs. The congressman wants jobs for his district, and I'm not even joking. That's what happens. So yeah. I think that's a really long answer to. I like what guys like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Relativity Space and Bigelow, and there's a lot of private companies out there.
Yeah, it's incredible what they're doing. And I think you're right, though. It kind of speaks to the bureaucracy of a lot of the government jobs and the private sector getting things done a lot faster and more efficiently, I think, across the board. I don't know if the government has ever outproduced the private sector in something anyways. But yeah, it's really cool, man, to hear what they're doing. And I just looked up, by the way, a moment ago, the distance from Earth to the moon, and it's something like 230,000 miles.
Yeah.
You said the space station is only 250 miles up in space.
Yeah.
The like the discrepancy in miles seems crazy. Is that why we haven't been there, you think, in like 40 years or so? Like a man hasn't been to the moon?
The problem is not distance. The problem is speed. So to get into orbit where we are, uh, 200 or 17,500 ish miles an hour. To go to the moon, you got to go 25,000 miles an hour. So it's an extra, you know, 40%, 30%, 40%. But that extra 30 or 40% is a lot, right? That's the difference between, rockets that we have and rockets that we don't. Of course, here's the other thing. We went from NASA being born, President Eisenhower in 1958 signing the paperwork, to being done with Apollo, all the different Apollo missions finished in less time than we're going to go from SLS being born to SLS flying once for the first time. So even though it's hard to get to the moon, we did it pretty quickly without ever having any experience back in the 60s. But the real difference is not distance, it's the speed that you need to get there.
Yeah. Is that speed that you need to get there, is that just like cost-wise incredible to maintain that for like probably, what is it, a couple of years that it would take to get to the moon?
No. The moon is just a few days. The Apollo took 3 days to get there.
Oh, really? Wow.
Mars is the really long.
Okay, I'm thinking of Mars.
Yeah, Mars is like 6 to 9 months one way, and then by that time, Earth and the Mars are going around the sun, right? So now you're in the wrong position. You got to wait for them to come around for the Earth to catch up. So the total time using just a regular rocket is about 3 years to get there. You spend a year and a half on the surface and come back, which is too long. I don't think the human body, all the supplies you're going to have to ship, and the cost of that, you're going to need a lot of SLS rockets to do that. And we're only going to be building one per year. So I don't think I think we need to get new propulsion that can get to Mars and back quicker if we're ever going to send people there.
Nice. Well, what's the longest time you've been out in space for? How, like days wise, how long was that?
My last flight, so if you consider Monday through Friday as 5 days, my last flight was 201 days, 201 flight days.
201 flight days. So it was like almost a year?
Yeah, like a little less than 7 months, a little more than half a year.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what's that like, man, when you're up there for so long? I know I've heard from somebody else, it might even have been the fighter pilot that we had on, but I noticed, I heard recently that when you're up there, you mentioned before, like working out, being in shape and all this other stuff. How do you work out? Because I know if you don't work out, your muscles will actually like wither away because you're not using them and actually keeping them strong. So what are some of the things that you're doing up there?
So NASA gave me 2.5 hours a day to work out. There's a weightlifting machine that's like this giant $1 million Bowflex. Instead of springs and bending metal, it's a big cylinder tube, like a vacuum tube. So it generates the force with a cylinder and a piston. And you can do bench press and squats and deadlifts. Anything you can do in your high school football room, you can do on this machine. Wow. And there's a treadmill that you use a football shoulder pad harness with some straps that hold you down on the treadmill. Otherwise, you'd take one step and bounce off the ceiling.
Yeah.
And there's a bike which has just shoes, like road bike clips. You put your feet in and click, and you're in the bike. There's no seat and there's no handlebar, so you literally can just float and pedal. Wow. So these 3 exercise machines for 2.5 hours a day. After 200-day mission, when I came back, they did this big full body X-ray scan, and I had lost 0.0% of my bone density.
Which means nothing.
My bones were in good shape. Yeah,
exactly.
And my muscles were good. I was probably 90%. I did 20 pull-ups the week I got back. I was in good shape, probably the best shape of my life. Wow. Because you're eating healthy. There's no fast food.
Yeah.
And you're exercising 2.5 hours. So it's kind of like going to a health club for 6 months.
So as far as like the physics of those exercise machines, when you say you're strapping down, are you basically taking one force and pushing it against the other so that you can like have that back and forth? Because there's no gravity to obviously keep you down, like if you're running, but if you have something pushing you this way, it's mimicking what gravity would do.
Yeah. So for the treadmill, like I said, you put on some shoulder pads and you clip on this big bungee cord. And you start off light and you can make it tighter. So by the end of my mission, I was using 130 or 140 pounds. So I don't know, 60 or 70% of my body weight. Um, and you're pulled down by your shoulder. So as you're running, you have to get used to it, because if you lean back, it'll pull you over backwards, or if you lean forwards, it'll pull you over forwards. So it's kind of like walking with a big heavy thing on your shoulder pads. It's not stable, but you have to have that pulling down. That's what causes the pounding, and it's the pounding of your legs that you need, because that's what when your bones get pounded, and they have what we call resistive exercise. Then that's what forces your bones to grow and your muscles to grow. So those types of things, for me, they work. I think for most astronauts, most guys have a little bit of bone loss, but if you're diligent about your exercise, you'll come back in good shape.
That's pretty cool. And as far as the diet goes, you said you eat pretty clean up there. What types of food are you eating? How's that look? And does it, like, if you take a sip of water or something, does it actually like float around like you see in the movies? And
Oh yeah,
really?
it would. Yeah, so that you drink out of a straw. Otherwise,
Wow.
you can just put it there and squeeze the water bag, and you'll get this bubble of water. The water that, or the food that I ate, was meats and vegetables and dried fruit and nuts and desserts. Basically, a lot of stuff you get on Earth. There's a NASA food lab, and they cook. Some of the stuff is like the military MRE, so it just comes in a green bag. You rip it open and it's ready to go, meal ready to eat. And then some of the stuff is dehydrated. It's in these little plastic bags. You pull it out, you plug it in, and it fills up, and squish it around, wait 10 minutes, and it turns into food.
Oh, that's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
I think they use that for like survival stuff too, right? The dehydrated stuff there.
Yeah, that, like in the military, it was,
yeah,
we have that kind of thing in the military.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool, man. That is so
Yeah.
neat. And so like the whole floating situation, does that immediately happen as soon as you hit space? You mentioned before, like from 250 miles up to even below, I think 100 miles is space.
It depends. So in the Air Force, if you go above 50 miles, you get astronaut wings.
What's that?
The traditional, the civilian organizations and internationally, it's 100 kilometers. That's 100 kilometers is recognized as space. So that's 62 miles. So somewhere between 50 and 62 miles, look, once you're out of the atmosphere, if you're floating and if you open your helmet and you die, to me, that's space.
So what is that actual sensation of floating like? Is it like one of the coolest feelings in the world? Like you just jumping around like you're like a little kid on a trampoline that, just don't come down?
It's amazing. I love it. There's a steep learning curve. Like you're learning a lot for weeks. It's a few weeks before you really get good at it. But you have to learn immediately. I mean, as soon as the engine shut down, you're floating. So you're not very coordinated, but you're doing it. And it's, it feels like you're falling because you're falling, right? So if I take this is a demonstration. If I take this, it falls, right?
Yeah.
Well, if I threw it 5 miles a second, in the 1 second it takes to drop from here to the table, it will have moved 5 miles. And so that forward motion with falling makes a curve. And if you're at the exact right speed, the shape of your curve is the shape of the Earth, and that's an orbit. If you slow down, your curve shrinks. If you slow down enough, it'll hit the atmosphere, and that's how you come back to Earth. You slow down. And if you speed up to 25,000 miles an hour, your curve will get so big that it'll leave Earth, and that's how you go to the moon or Mars or wherever. It's called escape velocity.
25,000 miles?
Roughly, yeah, 25,000 miles an hour.
Nice. So when you're actually like floating around in the aircraft though, how do you like navigate? You just kind of like swimming around in the air, like that type of thing?
No. No, you grab on with if you do this, you'll just do this, and eventually you'll spin yourself around, but you won't move. So you have to grab onto things. So you move with your hands, and you carry things with your feet if you want to. So you grab handrails and you kind of crawl around the station, and you push, and then you go floating in the other direction. So you get really good at that, but it takes some time. Oh. There's several chapters about that in my book.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I wouldn't even think of that, but that makes so much sense of how you would navigate around. It's just like a lot of pushing, and they have like little handlebars to grab around to like bring you into different spots, right?
The station's full of those handlebars. We call them uh, uh, foot restraints, not foot restraints, but like if you need to do some work, you just slide your feet under those bars and they keep you in place. So it's a whole new way of moving and stabilizing yourself. It's pretty cool learning process.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds so how do you actually sleep when you go to bed?
So in a sleeping bag, and in the shuttle, I would clip my sleeping bag to the wall. And then on the space station, we had like our own little phone booth crew cabin. So I would get my sleeping bag, zip it up, put head and arms in, and fall asleep and just float. So I wouldn't be velcroed to the wall. I wouldn't be clipped to anything. I would literally just float. It was awesome. It was really cool. There's a whole chapter about that.
How cool is that? Is that like a refreshing sleep? Is it one of the best sleeps of your life or what?
Yeah, it is. My first flight, by the way, I was just wiped out. It was so much work. It was work all day. So by the end of the day, I was wiped out. On my second flight, I was also wiped out at the end of the day. And, it was just the sleep in space is the best. I was worried. I didn't know if I would be able to fall asleep or not, but it wasn't a problem. Yeah. One of the interesting things, you had headphones, just like your headphones right now. And I'd plug them in. Went to sleep for about a month listening to Interstellar, the soundtrack from the film Interstellar.
Oh yeah. Yep.
The Hans Zimmer soundtrack. We got some sounds from Earth. The Russian psychologist sounds from Earth. So I went to sleep for about a month listening to Rain, which was just amazing. Even on Earth, Rain it's cool to listen to that when you fall asleep. But in space, it was really, really nice. And my dreams went from dreaming about space to dreaming about Earth. When I had the headphones on with sounds from Earth, my brain was like, you're back on Earth now. So it would dream about Earth. It was really wild.
That's pretty cool. That is neat, man. Wow.
Yeah, it was wild.
That's awesome. So what is the actual like work that you're doing up there while you're there for, like on a day-to-day basis? What types of things are you like researching, looking into? Like what's the whole like mission for a lot of these missions that you go on?
Well, you got to it. The mission of the space station is science. That's why we have this International Space Station. So during my last flight, we had 250 different experiments. Some of them were automated. I never did anything. And some of them were really intensive. I did lots and lots of hours of work on them. But biology, chemistry, physics, medicine, astronomy, material science, combustion science, any kind of science you can study in a university, there's an experiment going on. But in addition to that, the equipment breaks. So there was lots of maintenance, 2.5 hours a day of exercise. Every few times a year, there's spacewalks. So you got to get ready for your spacewalk. Cargo ships come up and down, and there's a lot of unpacking and packing. You're basically an accountant for a few weeks every time one of those comes up. So interviews, we would do interviews like this a couple times a week. So there's a lot of different things to do. No day's the same. Every day is different.
Nice. What are you wearing, by the way, while you're up there? Is it just regular clothes?
So on the shuttle, we had polo shirts. On the station, they just give you a cotton t-shirt. I mean, it's literally like wearing an undershirt around. And I wore shorts as opposed to long pants. And they're kind of like, how policemen on bikes or whatever, they have those tactical shorts or, rugged shorts. So they had 10 or 15 pockets, and NASA sews Velcro on them. So that's super useful. So all of our pens and Sharpies will have a little thing of Velcro. So you just stick that on your Velcro and it'll stay. Otherwise, everything floats away. So I wore these tactical shorts with Velcro and a t-shirt. Nice. 90% of the time.
Sounds comfortable enough. Not too bad.
Yeah.
And as far as like showering and doing all that stuff, how does that work? I'm sure it's got to be different, right?
We're going through all the chapters. So it's every 13-year-old boy's dream. There are no showers in space.
Oh, wow.
Water, well, it's probably 40 or $50,000 a kilo, and a can of Coke is a third of a kilo. So this can of Coke would cost $15,000 or more to launch into space. So the water we do use, we'll squirt it into a towel and just wipe down with a wet towel. Maybe put a little bit of soap in there. But I tell you what, you get naked. I use rinseless shampoo, like what the hospitals use. So put a little bit of that in there. The IMAX movie I made, Beautiful Planet, there's a scene of me showering in the IMAX film, which Disney put it out on Hulu, just because everybody's sitting at home with nothing to watch. So you can watch Beautiful Planet. You can see my shower scene.
Oh, nice.
I joke. I got paid. It's a nude scene. I'm naked in that scene, so I got paid twice as much as my crewmates for doing the nude scene. Two times zero. So anyway, so you can kind of see what it's like, but wet towels and a little bit of soap, and it gets you clean.
Yeah. How often are you doing that? Maybe every couple days, or is it every day?
I did it well.
Just for efficiency.
Floating around, you don't get dirty at all. But if you exercise, you're just drenched. Mm-hmm. And so I would, by exercising, get wet and sweaty. And so I would pretty much shower every day, which part of the 2.5 hours goes into getting dressed and getting a shower. And
yeah. How is like bacteria, pathogens, that kind of stuff up in space? Is it different, or is it still the risk for that stuff is still the same?
So that's a great question. Your immune system gets worse in space. It doesn't work as well, but there's no other people, so you're not spreading germs, right? There's no COVID until there is, because once there is, everybody's going to get it. But as long as you prevent it, then nobody gets it. And so, one of the experiments I did, actually, I spent days doing this. I went around and basically swabbed and did these really highly clinical, like medical tests to see what the microbes were, if there was, bacteria or viruses or whatever. So I sampled the whole station from that, and it's different than Earth. And in your stomach too, they call it the microbiome. You got gut, there's bacteria in there, and that changes. In fact, my neighbor is a fellow astronaut classmate of mine. We were talking the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, did your is your stomach different?" And a lot of guys complain about it. I've never heard it. Been an astronaut for 20 years, never heard anybody talk about this, but we were just comparing notes. And so those bacteria change when you go to space, and it's interesting, but
yeah, I would figure that, though. It does make sense. And it just kind of reminded me of a different thing. It's a little gross, but we don't have to get too graphic, but how do you actually go to the bathroom up there?
Very carefully.
Yeah.
There's a procedure for it, and you follow the procedure. There's a chapter about that, and a couple times I didn't, and I talk about what happened. So the bottom line is there's airflow. So on Earth you got gravity, right? Gravity makes sure everything goes in that direction. In space you don't. So there's airflow that makes sure everything goes. So as long as the air is blowing, stuff's going to go in the right direction. You just want to make sure that you turn the fans on and you take care of things and you don't mess anything up. Do
you just shoot it out into space, or is it like tubed up?
Yeah. So on the shuttle, the urine tank we could vent, and you do that, and there would just be this giant cloud of urine going out. It freezes into ice in space, and in sunlight, it's beautiful. It's really this cool cloud of pee out there. So there's cans. The Russians call them keteo. The poop cans, you seal them up, and they come back to Earth. Or these cargo ships that they just burn up in the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, and so when you see a meteor streaking, you'll know what's in the streaking meteor if you're watching one of the station cargo ships. But the urine we actually recycle. Like I said, water. This is tens of thousands of dollars for a Coke can.
Wow.
So water is expensive. So we actually recycle it. There's a really complicated system on the American side that does the recycling.
Filters it, purifies it.
Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, it's good. You can't tell. It's just water.
Nice. Just a few more questions, man, then we'll wrap up. I know we both got to run in a moment,
but
as far as like isolation goes, that type of thing, you mentioned before that you wrote a little book about being in that same spot, and I'm sure you're probably better than anybody else as far as this goes of what to do in that kind of environment. But what do you do to get yourself by? How do you keep a sane mindset, and what types of things are like you focusing on throughout the day?
Well, I think the most important thing is attitude. So I I just took the attitude of, okay, I'm here in space. I don't know when I'm coming back to Earth, but this isn't going to last forever. We're going to get through it. So I'm going to make the most of things while I can. Same thing with COVID. This isn't going to last forever. It's going to last for a while. This ain't going to be fixed in the next couple months. So just know that. And guess what? None of us can change it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a human on Earth that can change. We could improve how we're doing things, but you can't end it, right? So with that being said, to try as best you can, try not to worry about what you can't change and just focus on the things you can change. And then for me, making sure I was doing something meaningful. They gave us some really good activities. In the last 6 months, I've gotten a lot of TV and film projects going that I want to do. Wrote a book. I got a call tomorrow about another book with my editor. I've helped a couple of companies get going, some energy and aerospace companies. So I'm like, before I was a speaker, my day job, I would travel around. I went to all 7 continents the last couple of years. I've been doing a lot of speaking. It's been really good, and it's done with.
Yeah, sucks.
So that life is over with.
Yeah.
Now, maybe next year, maybe the year after it'll come back, but maybe not. So I kind of had to say, life changed. So I'm not just going to lament it and sit around and die. I'm actually going to go out and be proactive and try and reinvent myself. And the economy is changing. The demographics are changing. The world is changing. So you can either, lament it and want to go back in time, or the better way is go, look, this is what the future is going to be, embrace it and go, reinvent yourself. It's a hard thing to do. But if you can do that, I think in the long run, it will be better off.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, like how you deal with fear, because I'm sure it's a lot of fearful things going on with taking off and the launch, and there's people that died in the past. It sounds like though, maybe it's a little different, but it does sound like you might have the same approach as far as like accepting it and kind of going with it, as opposed to dragging your feet and then being like more fearful of it. Is it similar to that?
Yeah. So fear can paralyze you, and prevent you from acting or, doing what you need to do. And that's not good when you're in space. It's not good when you're on Earth. So you need to, come to a happy place where, yes, there's a risk. I might die doing this. I might lose my job. I might whatever. And you don't just want to be a daredevil. NASA's not looking for daredevils. When I go through applications, daredevil, like that flag is a flag. You want, President Kennedy said, this nation shall commit itself to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. And my favorite part about his speech was returning him safely to the Earth. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of astronauts that we're looking for. So I think you need to look at risk, analyze it. If there's some obvious problem, you fix it. Other problems, you fix it. Other problems, you fix it. There's a few problems that you're never going to be able to fix. In the Air Force, we used to say, look, if you want zero risk, then just don't fly. If you don't fly your F-16 today, you're not going to crash your F-16. But that's unacceptable because the nation needs us to fly our F-16s to defend the country. So if you could just not go into space and no one would ever die in space. But so in other words, pick the risks that you're going to assume, try and get rid of the ones that you don't need. And the other ones that you have to have in your mind, go, look, there's this risk, I'm going to take it, and let's go do whatever it is you're going to do. If it's get a new job, if it's go on a cross-country trip, if it, whatever it is. But the way you approach risk, I think, can help you deal with fear, because otherwise it's just paralyzing. You don't. I know with money, like I've been doing some trading. My son taught me about Robinhood.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I'll do like a couple $100. I'm not doing, I'm not like Mr. Wolf of Wall Street or anything, but it's been fun. But there's some things I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like if I go to Las Vegas fairly often for work, and I just can't put a quarter in a slot machine. Like I cannot bring myself to gamble. If I lose a quarter, I will be so mad the whole day. If I go spend $500 on a new jacket or something, I'll be happy, but if I lose a quarter,
same.
And so it's not rational. It's just the way I am. So you kind of remove yourself from those emotions as much as you can and be rational about it as much as you can.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's such a great approach. Terry, what's a last send-off takeaway message for the Elite Man audience, and then a place our listeners can check out your website, the book, everything you got going on?
One of maybe the biggest lesson I learned from my career at NASA and my space travels is pretty simple. It's a great lesson for kids. It's a great thing for adults. And that is, don't tell yourself no. So, everybody has goals and dreams and gifts and talents. It's really easy to tell yourself no, and, oh, that's too hard. I can't do that. Or no, who's an astronaut? Who's ever going to be an astronaut? You're not going to get to be that. So if you tell yourself no, you won't ever get to be whatever it is you want to do. If you want to start a company, if you want to have a family, if you want to, be the president or whatever it is you want to do, if you tell yourself no, you're not going to get to do it. So you need to figure out where your gifts and talents are. And the bigger the goal, you can't just say, I want to be a doctor. My son's applying to medical school now. My God, that's a lot of work. I mean, that is a lot of work. So the bigger the goal, the harder you have to work. But the harder you work, the luckier you get. And if you achieve the goal, that's awesome. If you don't achieve the goal, you can figure out a new way. You got to go back and get some more training, go to school, try it again the next time. And if you never get it, at least you tried, right? But if you tell yourself no, you're never going to achieve those goals that you want to achieve.
Yeah, so true. And what's the website link and the book link?
So my website is just terryvirts.com. There's my book.
Cool.
The publisher sent me a copy of it.
Nice.
So it's out, and you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or you can do it signed copies on my website. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. So it should be fun. It's 51 short chapters about all different aspects.
Yeah.
My goal is to make you laugh and say wow. So it's not. Anybody can read it. You can read a chapter in 5 minutes. Probably, most of them are pretty short. Sitting at the beach or at the pool or on your nightstand by your bed. Hopefully it'll be fun. And look, there's enough negative this year. There's lots of hate and anger out there. So hopefully this will be something that's fun.
Yeah. Love it. I'm definitely going to check it out myself, man. I know we covered a lot of the topics here, but there's 51 chapters or so you said in the book, and there's a lot more I want to learn about myself. So, guys, it's How to Astronaut, an Insider's Guide to Leaving Planet Earth. Terry, thanks again for coming on the show, man. I really do appreciate it. And
thanks for having me. This is a cool interview.